Welcome to the Breakaway Podcast, a Bible study recorded on the campus of Texas A&M. We hope you enjoy the talks and stick around for more at the end.
Well, we had an interesting thing happen as we were preparing for and praying over this semester where God might lead us in this new year. And that was, we basically saw this spring breaks down into kind of 3 5-week blocks. Like there's a 5 weeks at the beginning here where I'll be teaching you. And then there's this 5-week block in the middle of the semester where we've got just a lot of different things happening, different guest speakers coming in. And then we've got a 5-week block at the end of the semester where I'll be back teaching you through a series again. So as I was looking at that, I was thinking, okay, God, I've got kind of these 2 5-week blocks to bring something to these students. What would you have me do in those 5 weeks? Would you have us move through a book of the Bible? Do you want us to cover a specific topic? What do you want us to do? And so I just began to pray over you and praying for what God wants in your life and what he might lead us to journey to into your life. And an interesting thing happened as I was praying for you. This started happening in my house. That's my little girl for reference. And that just happened. She went from about 2 steps to about 16. And I'd like to point out that they were all directed straight towards the door. And as I saw that, I thought, oh my God, you are already a little person. You're wearing jeans. She's growing up. And it was starting to freak me out. And as I started to pray for her, man, something started happening in my heart as I'm praying for my little girl and our other little girl on the way. I'm like, oh man, I've got to raise these little women. And Lord, what do I want to be true of them? What do I want to impart to them? What qualities am I hoping will be characteristic of their life? And I just started asking God that, and I started making a list of these are the things that I hope mark the character of my girls. These are the kind of women I want them to be. And as I just started praying over that, God, let this be true. It was interesting because as I'm praying for them in my home and you in my study, I started looking at these lists, and they're basically the same list. And so it's interesting when you approach teaching like this, you can start with a book of the Bible, and I love to do that, where you go, we're going to study this book, and then you just start building bridges to apply it to your life. But there's another way to teach where you start with you and say, these are the things I'm praying for you and hoping for you and want to be true of you. And now let's make a bridge toward texts in the Bible that can help you get there and be those kinds of people and possess those kinds of things. And I believe that's what God's calling us to this semester. Very much as I was praying for you, I thought of Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Hero's Journey. And he just marks how in mythology and even our modern stories of heroes, they all kind of follow the similar path. And typically what happens at the beginning of the journey of the hero is someone older comes and gives them the tools they need to be successful on their journey. So Luke Skywalker gets his lightsaber, right? Harry Potter gets his wand, right? Batman gets his sick ninja skills, right up front, right? And you get these skills you need to accomplish whatever you're being called to. And I thought, okay, I want to give them certain skills, and we're going to do that. At the end of the semester, I want to teach you skills about how to handle money and how to handle sex and how to handle friendship and how to handle drinking and all these different things. But then if you notice the journeys of the heroes as you look at your favorite movies and stories you've read and fairy tales, there's skills they need to pick up, but there's qualities, characteristics that make them a hero. And so I want to cover skills you need, things you need to know in your head. And we're going to do that later in this semester. But as I looked at this first 5 weeks we have together, I go, before we talk about skills in your head, I want to talk about character qualities in your heart. Things I want to be true of you as you march out onto the journey God has for you. And so that's what we're going to do. This first couple weeks feels very personal to me. This is like my feathers from my nest talk, right? Except that's what Beth Moore called it, and that kind of scares me to talk about nesting, so I won't. It's more of my, this is what I want to be true of you, punch you in the arm series. But to start tonight, I want to cover the first one, and it's simply this. What do I want for you? That's this series. What do I want for you? What do I want to be true of you? And the first thing I want for you is I want you to be courageous. I want you to be courageous. I want you to be brave. That's what I want. Anais Nunn said this: life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. And it's true. That without courage, you live small little lives, and I don't want you to live small little lives that are just about comforts and distractions and gathering movies and video games and texting and all these little things to fill your time and make you comfortable, and you never launch out to accomplish big things. I don't want a small life for you. I want a big life for you, where you engage, where you jump out there. I want that for my girls. I don't want them to carve out a safe little nook in this world where they just make themselves comfortable. William Shedd said this: a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for. They're meant to venture out onto the seas. As unpredictable and dangerous as that is, they're meant to go. And I want my girls to go. I want them to accomplish things. I want them to engage life. And I want that for you too. I want you to build things and overcome things and accomplish things. I want you to live. And you say, Ben, why are you starting with courage? Shouldn't you start with things like, I want you to love, or I want you to be filled with truth or justice or something like that? Well, it's true that courage stands at the bottom. It's the base of all other virtues. It ensures the existence of the other virtues. Because if you can have love, but if you don't have courage, you'll never express love. You can love the truth, but if you never have courage, you'll never speak the truth when it's needed. And you can value justice, but without courage, you'll never do justice for the sake of the oppressed. Courage is the foundation that makes other virtues possible. It's the activity that ensures their existence. So before we talk about any other virtues in your life, we need to be men and women of courage. And that's what I want for you. I want you to be courageous people. And so the only thing we got to figure out after that is, okay, Ben, what do you mean by that? Like, what is courage? And why would I want that? And how do I get it anyway? Well, what is courage? Here's the cool thing. In Hebrew, it's the word hazak, which I love that word hazak because it sounds like huzzah, which if you don't know that, that's what like a century ago, British mariners would say as they launched into battle. Before they just sent their ship into war, they would all go, huzzah, right? And I looked up the etymology of that. They're like, we have no idea who started saying that. Just some guy was like, let's yell huzzah. Let's just go for it. Maybe he got it from the Hebrew because it sounds like the word for courage in Hebrew. It's the word hazak. It's actually the first word my little daughter ever said. It was amazing. She's just there in our room and she just starts going, hana! And I'm like, yeah, hana! Right? And I don't think she grasps the impact of what she's saying, but I just love that. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, girl. I want you to get after it, right? And it means courage, but the root of the word, it's the word strength. It means to have strength. That's what hazak is. It's strength. The word courage comes from the Latin. It comes from cor, which means heart. It means to have heart. And so it's good to combine those, to say courage is to have strength of heart. And so I looked up Webster's dictionary, and it says it's the strength to venture, to persevere, and to withstand danger. And I read that, I'm like, that's amazing, because I had just been doing a biblical study on what is courage in the Bible. And courage in the Bible is to have a strong heart. And then when you look, the people who have it always do three things. And it's the things Webster mentioned. I think he reads his Bible or something. People who have courage initiate something. Something doesn't exist and they say, I'm going for it. I'm going to make it. Courage leads people to overcome obstacles. Something's in their way and they say, I'm going to persevere through it. Or courage leads people to resist enemies. And you see it all through the Bible that they have strong hearts to initiate something, to overcome something, to resist something. And you see that all through the Bible. That's what courage is. I'm going to step out and build, and I'm going to persevere when it's hard, and I'm going to resist enemies as I do it, and I'm going to partake in the world. I'm going to live. And that's what courage is. And I want that for you. And what's fascinating is, as you look through the Old Testament, that word shows up more than anywhere else in the book of 2 Chronicles. It's the book of hazak, of courage. Now, some of you go, Ben, why take me to 2 Chronicles? I already know 2 Chronicles. I got it memorized. I know many of you are very familiar with 2 Chronicles. I'm sure some of you in this room are like, man, that was my nickname in high school. They called me Chronicles, right? I mean, I already got it locked down. But for the few of you that maybe haven't perused 2 Chronicles, let me just tell you what is happening in 2 Chronicles. In the book of Genesis, God grabs a man named Abraham and says, hey man, I got an adventure for you. I got a story for you. And I want you to move from where you are, and I'm going to put you onto a little piece of real estate I care a lot about. And from there, I'm going to use your family to bless every family on the globe. And Abraham launched out on the journey. And his little family grew. They took a little detour down to Egypt where they could grow from a little family to a nation. Then God raised up Moses and said, I got a story for you. And it's not herding sheep anymore. Let the sheep go, Moses. I want you to lead my people. And you get the Exodus. Let my people go. And he gets them out of Egypt and leads them back into this piece of real estate God cares about quite a bit. And what's amazing in the Old Testament is as you look at that little piece of land, it is not in some safe little pocket of the world. If you look at it, it's actually the only place on the globe where a little strip of land connects 3 major continents. So as you look through the history in the Bible, every major national power, every world power, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Rome, they all go through this area to conquer it. God did not put his people in safe little places. He puts them right in the middle of the action. And as they become a nation, they get solidified under a king. And when you get to the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles, it's the kings of God's people ruling in the land God wanted to put them in. And as you read 2nd Chronicles, it all is kind of a basic story that plays out under one question. As you look at the chapter, each king gets about 1 chapter. Some get a few more. But the basic question over the top is, how's he going to do? What kind of life is he going to live? And you see some of them, they're dominated by their fears. And they make little treaties and just live these small little lives where they don't help anybody. You see some of them that are totally controlled by their lusts and they hurt their people and ruin their lives. But then you see other ones that are courageous. And you got guys like Abijah who steps out to lead his people. And he's in his 20s. And he gets attacked by an army that's got him outnumbered 2-1. And then they surround him, which if you don't know that, militarily, that's bad. And they step in. The guy's in his 20s, been king for 3 years, and he's surrounded by an army with double the numbers. That's not good. He's got a response, and he could fold like a lawn chair like some other kings did. But Abijah stands up and gives a speech. And he says, hey, we're the people of God. We follow God's true king. We have the sacrifices for the forgiveness of our sins. You don't want this fight because we will take you out. And they look at him like, you're crazy. And they attack him. And so he looks over at the trumpeters. They blow the trumpet. They yell the battle shout. And they clean house, whip up all these people. And he secures his nation, saves them, raises them. And I read this and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. Name my kid Abijah. No, maybe not. Something like that though, right? You read about guys like Uzziah, man, who's beaten back the Philistines and raising up the city of Jerusalem and planting all these vineyards so people can flourish. And you go, that's what I'm talking about. This guy's living. He's engaged. But then the text says he became strong. Same word, hazak. He became strong, but then he got proud to his own destruction. And it's interesting, as I was reading that, I'm like, man, courageousness, strength, power. I want that for my people. But then you look and you go, but man, there's a twisted version of it. So you can be courageous and step out to do things, but do it out of self-love. That's what he ended up doing. And you look and you go, that's not any kind of life. And some of you do courageous things athletically, courageous things in business. I mean, you're going out there and making a name for yourself and your organization. But at the end of the day, it's all about you. And let me tell you something, that's a small life. And that'll never satisfy your soul. And if you spend all your energy as a young man and woman building your little kingdom, when you die, no one will care about what you built. And it won't last. And so I look and go, there's a kind of courage that can be all about you. And that's not what I want for my girls. That leads to destruction. I don't want that. And it was interesting. I read a book, a group of soldiers were sitting around. They were talking about how to have courage in the face of battle. Like what makes a man launch out into battle unafraid. And so then they framed the question, what's the opposite of fear? And they asked a group of courageous soldiers, man, how do you guys do it? And they said, well, we're so afraid of dishonoring ourselves. We have an honor culture. We're so afraid of dishonor. We're more afraid of dishonor than we are of battle. So we launch out to battle because we're afraid of dishonor. And we go, well, that makes you do something that people would call courageous. But that's not actually a good thing. You're just replacing one fear for another fear. And some of you, that's the kind of courageousness you got. That, man, you do stuff that we go, wow, look at that guy. He started an organization on campus. That was so brave, so courageous. But you know, and your journal betrays you, that you did it because you're just trying to make a name for yourself because you're terrified you'll be a nobody. Or some of you are stepping out and dating someone and you asked a girl to be your girlfriend, or you jumped into a relationship with a boyfriend, but it's not about love for them. It's just because you're scared of being left out, scared of being alone. Or some of you, you're launching out on a career path and you're doing all these things to build a career, but the truth is you're just doing it because you're terrified of your parents' disapproval. And you're just hoping to get them to smile at you, and you'll do anything. And the truth is, you go, that's not real courage. Replacing one fear with another fear, you're still dominated by fear. And I don't want my girls to live like that. I don't want them to chase this world just terrified. I want a different kind of courage. And so I read about Jehoshaphat. That's who we read about earlier. And I love what it says about him. It says his heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. And I read that and I thought, that's what I want for my girls. His heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. And I love that because, one, it doesn't just say, and Jehoshaphat was just a good little Christian. He didn't cuss much. He never got drunk. He didn't go to rated R movies. He was just a sweet guy, right? And some people, that's about as high as our aspirations go as Christians. And I just think that's lame. I don't want my daughters to just be sweet girls. No! I want this to be the banner over their life. He was courageous in the ways of the Lord. I want that to be the banner over my life, that Ben just wasn't trying to be good. He was doing something with courage, but it's in the way of the Lord. It's a part of something bigger than just me. It's part of something bigger than fear. It's something powerful. It's actually the most powerful motivator of courage. So this book I read about soldiers, they were talking about what's the opposite of fear. And they said, well, it's not that honor thing, because that's just substituting one fear for another fear. That's not it. And then finally, one of them came up to him and said, you know what the purest source of courage is? It's love. It's love. Because when you love somebody, you become courageous. You can't help it. When you care, you engage. And that's the truth. And you see Jehoshaphat, he had a love for God. It says he sought the God of his father. He walked with him, and his heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. And that's what I want for my girls. I want them to have a love for God that becomes courage, because love moves you into action. So I had a friend in high school. I remember he came up to me one time and he was like, dude, I got to tell you the story. And I'm like, what is it? And he was one of those guys that, was kind of a macho guy. And he was like, man, I was in this classroom and there's this guy in front of me and they handed out this deal. We were voting on these different people to get in these offices. And he starts just going down the list and making fun of everybody. And he's pointing them out. That kid's weird. That kid smells funny. He's got a big head. He's just going on and ripping on these people. And it's getting annoying. I'm like, whatever, but I'm not going to say anything. He said, but he's marching down the list, and I look at my girlfriend's names on the list. And he said, sure enough, he gets to her, and he starts making fun of her for being small and big-headed. And he said, and you know what I did, man? He said, I just stood up and was like, hey, man, you don't talk to her like that. And he's like, I just shut it down, man. Just right in the middle of the class, just went off on this guy. And I remember he's telling me the story, and I'm like, well, I'm proud of you, man. That's great. But then I remembered that my name was on that list. And I was like, hey, so my name was on there too. Did he make fun of me? And he was like, yeah, he was talking about how you got a weird-shaped noggin and whatever. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, did you say anything? And he was like, what? No. No. I didn't say that. So I'm thinking about that. What prompted him to engage? What launched the courage in him? It's love. Love will make you move. And so there was a bus driver in Brooklyn that this 7-year-old girl with autism stepped out onto the AC unit on the outside of her window on her 3rd floor apartment. And this disoriented little girl was dancing on top of a air conditioner unit. And you can watch the video of it, and what strikes me about this moment is there's this little girl, but if you think about it, there's 2 other people in that moment. There's this bus driver from Brooklyn, and he sees this little girl, and he just runs and waits to catch her. And sure enough, she eventually slips and falls, and you see her fall, and you see this guy just step into it and just take the blow of her landing on him. Destroys his arms, rips his tendons apart. And then I'm watching this and going, but how am I watching this? And it's because another guy is filming it on his phone. And when she hits the ground with him, he just goes, whoa. And I remember looking at that and going, that was your response. You had about 3 or 4 minutes of her dancing on top of this deal. And what was your response in that moment? You saw a little girl in jeopardy and you went, dude, I got to film this. And he just stood there and filmed it. That's it. I'm a spectator. I'm going to see what happens to this little girl if she falls off or something. And when a dude catches her, I'll go, whoa, and then I'll put it on YouTube. This other guy sees it. And what does he do? He runs and he stands there and he takes the hit, destroys his arms, but saves the girl's life. And they came up to the man and they said, you're a hero. And he's like, nah, hero's a sandwich. Which was totally a goofy thing to say, but whatever. But they asked him, why'd you do it? Why'd you do it? And he said, anyone who has kids or loves people would have done that. He said, so I just ran and put my arms out. And that's not a hero. That's just because I have love. Because love makes you courageous. It's the purest form. And Jehoshaphat's a man who loved God. And it says, when that happened, his heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. What happens when you become a person like that? It'll lead you to resist evil. You'll resist evil. I love what this passage said about him. It says he walked in the ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but he sought the God of his father and walked in his commandments, not according to the practices of Israel. And they purposefully contrast. He loved the Lord, he sought the Lord, and that made him different from his culture. Because his culture was soaked in Baal worship. Baal worship was always interesting to the Israelites because it's what all the other nations were doing. Baal was the god of blessing on the land, of fertility, and so the way you would worship Baal was by going to a big fertility party and sleeping with prostitutes. Or when you were really intense, you would sleep with prostitutes, maybe sell your daughter into prostitution, and you would also offer your sons and daughters as sacrifices on the altar. You can read about it in 2 Kings or Hosea. And what's interesting is you read through Chronicles, you got some kings that they say, man, they chose to follow the Lord, but they didn't touch the high places where people were doing that. They were just like, well, I don't know, it's the culture I live in. The people love the Baals. I can't cancel the Baal party. You got other kings that just jump in. But you got Jehoshaphat. He's like, I love the Lord. And when you love the Lord, you look around and things that dishonor him, things that hurt the people he cares about, you go, I don't want that. I don't want that. And man, when you become a courageous person, you'll resist evil. I want that for you. And there's a lot of us in here, if we're honest, you'd say, yeah, I'm a Christian, Ben, yeah. But that has not led you to resist evil. You tolerate it in your own life. You wouldn't do some of those things, but you have some pet sins that you take care of, you coddle, you make space for, that you say, this amount of that's okay. Or you go, man, all my friends, we all talk that way. We all do that sort of thing. It's fine. We're not hurting anybody. And you make a space for things God hates. And when you become a courageous person in the Lord, you say, I don't want to do that. And it says he went and he cut the high places down. So I had a friend here in town. We went to lunch the other day, and he's got a little girl. And I guess she's in junior high or maybe early high school. He was like, Ben, she called me the other day, or actually, no, she came home early the other night from going out to a movie. And I said, why'd she come home early? And he was like, well, man, she went out there to meet some friends. This guy had asked her on a date. And he said, as soon as they got to the movie theater, this guy's just all over her, groping her. And she just looked at him, stood up and said, I'm not that kind of girl. Bam, and got in the car and drove off. And he's telling me the story. And as a dad, he's just like, and she told him, I'm not that kind of girl. And she walked off. And I'm sitting there in this booth, and I'm like, hell yeah, she did. Let's stop that, right? I'm like, let's go beat him up now. Just put something on him, right? But I'm like, yes! And for me, at that point, I'm like, talk me through everything you did to your daughter. Making that kind of person. And he said, you know why she did it, Ben? It's not because she's wearing a purity ring. Oh, the ring. The rings ain't going to do it. It's because she loves the Lord. And she knows that the Lord has a plan for her relationally, has a plan for her sexually, and it's good, and she trusts him. And so she don't want to do that. And so I'm going to resist evil. And some of you, you've seen that. You had courage. We did a Shalom project last spring where, man, we put that information in front of you that, hey, there's people sold in sex trafficking in Houston, Texas, all over Houston. And the truth is, it's a supply-demand industry. You attack the demand, the supply will dry up. And so if you recall, we wrote a letter to the government of Texas specifically aimed at Houston. And you said, you know what? I love God. And if I love God, I can't just love God and then just sit still and live a boring, safe little life. It pushes me to engage. And when I see evil, I don't go, well, I guess that's the culture I live in. I say, no, I got to name it as evil and do something about it. That's what courage does. And we sent out a letter to the government and said, hey, we want to change this. And I got to tell you something. We did that last spring. And in August, 21 buyers, solicitors of sex with children were arrested in Houston. Did you know that? A big part of that was you. It was you. And I love that. And love does that. Love makes you brave, and it makes you engage. It makes you resist evil. Say, we can't put up with it there. We're going to change that. It leads you to bless people. You engage. I won't read it all to you, but in chapter 19, it says, Jehoshaphat lived at Jerusalem, but he went out among the people, and he brought them back to the Lord. And he appointed judges over them that said, deal courageously with these people. I love that Jehoshaphat didn't just look for problems and go, let me just try to keep that sin off me. It says he looked out and said, you know what? My people are out there. I'm going to go bless them. They need some leadership. I'm going to raise some people up, and I'm going to mix it up and do good. Courage will do you that. It'll make you initiate to do something good. And some of us, we say, yeah, Ben, I'm a Christian, but we look at your life and it doesn't look any different than anybody else. And let me tell you something. Read the books by the modern atheists. Most of them, they're not real coherent arguments against the existence of a deity. They're not. They're not good arguments. They're railing on Christians for not doing anything in the face of injustice. And I know many of you are, so I'm not beating you up, but the truth is, love will give you courage to look out and say, is there good I can do? I want to do it. I want to do it. So I was over at Passion in Atlanta, a conference for college students this January. And as I was flying back, Passion is a wonderful time, amazing time to worship God, exhausting time. So on my way back to the plane, I had plans to sleep the entire time. But I got on this plane, and the plane was pretty much college students coming back from Passion, men in uniform being shipped off somewhere. And that was pretty much the whole plane. And so I had these sweet girls come up to me, these college girls with all their Passion wristbands on. And they come running up to me and they're like, hey, we want to see if we can pray over the intercom for all the soldiers on the plane. Do you think we should do it? And I said, I think you should ask. I said, I wouldn't just grab the intercom. I could go south on you. I said, but don't say no for them. I mean, ask them if you can do it, but, whatever. And so I guess they went and did it. They came back to me and they're like, they won't let us. They said it might upset some people. And I said, okay. I said, well, you know what? Maybe you're just going to sit by some. And you don't have to say a blanket prayer over all of them, but maybe you'll have a conversation with some of them. And I just pulled that out of nowhere. I don't know, maybe talk to some, all right? And then I fell asleep promptly on the plane. But I woke up somewhere in the middle of the flight. And before I even opened my eyes, the first thing I hear is just, it's not about going to church or just being a good person. It's about Jesus. He's changing my life, and I love him. And I open my eyes, and it's 2 rows in front of me. It's those college girls. And they're up on their knees on the seats looking behind him. At the seat right in front of me, it's just a row of guys in uniform on their way to ship out to their first duty, first base, just launching out into this new journey. And these girls just talking to them. They say, where are you from? Where are you going? Can I tell you about the best thing I have in my life? These girls just talk to these guys on the plane, real polite to them, real gentle with them, real encouraging to them, prayed for them over the end of it. And I just thought, there's so many different ways to handle a plane ride. And these girls just said, hey, we got a chance to do good. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. And you look around in the world today, and one of the greatest engines of Islamic extremism in the world today is poverty. They purposefully move to places where people are poor because they're watching their children die and disease ravage them and no one cares, no one helps them. They come in and it's easy to radicalize a group like that. How do we stop terrorism in the world? There's a military solution that at times needs to be implemented, and I believe that. But the truth is, maybe for some of us, the way we do it is we go to the poorest places in the world and we just initiate. I'm not going to live a life that's safe and comfortable. Maybe I go somewhere where the poor and hurting are and I make a difference. So that when someone comes and tries to make them a murderer in the name of God, they say, that's not the God I know. I know the one that in love came for me because they came for me. And maybe we step out in courage and change things, right? Last thing I would add is it leads you to overcome opposition. There's a beautiful story. I won't read all of it, but Jehoshaphat finds out in chapter 20 that a confederation of nations is coming to attack him and his people. And it says Jehoshaphat becomes alarmed. And I just love that. It's like, hey, multiple nations are attacking you. And they say, and they're in En-Gedi, which is basic translation, they're in your backyard. And it says, and he became alarmed. And when I read that, the first thing I thought was, jump in Jehoshaphat. That's probably where it came from, Because he's just sitting there reading and, anyway. Total panic. And it says, and Jehoshaphat was afraid. And he set his face to seek the Lord. And the nation assembled to seek the Lord. And he gets in front of them and he says, Lord, you're the God of our fathers. You rule the nations. You picked us to be your people. And then he says, God, this horde is coming to us and we're powerless. We don't know what to do. And our eyes are on you. And as they seek the Lord, one of their brothers gets a word from God and said, God tells us to ride out. And he'll take care of us. And I love Jehoshaphat's plan. So many other kings cower and cajole and give away things and do some terrible, terrible things to save their own hide. Jehoshaphat gets up in front of his people the next day and says, believe in the Lord and you will be established. Believe in his prophets, you will succeed. And then he appoints a group of people to sing and to lead out the army in singing. How'd you like that job? I just love that. There's a horde attacking us. But God will take care of us. You guys, lead out with song, right? And these guys just march into battle saying, the steadfast love of the God is forever. It's forever. Just walking towards an army. Right? And what happens? It says, and when they began to sing, and I love that. Will God come through? Yeah. But sometimes he'll make you wait. Not while you're praying, not when you first get the news, not overnight, not that first morning as you're marshaling. He'll wait till you get all the way to singing. And it says, and when they set out singing, God set an ambush. And there was intrigue in the camp. These other camps began to quarrel, and they fought each other, murdered each other. And when Jehoshaphat and his people showed up, the battle was already won. And for 3 days, they just collected the goods in what they called the Valley of Praise. And I looked at that and I thought, God made them march out knowing nothing but the promises of God. This could go bad, but our God is with us. And by the end of it, they win spectacularly. And they rename the Valley of Praise. And as I read that, I thought, I want my girls to live on the Valley of Praise. And how do you live in a valley like that? You first have to walk through the fields of faith. You got to step out and sing into the craziness and see what your God will do. I had a couple of you, 2 girls, I think they're still here. They were freshmen when they first came to me down at the foot of this stage. And I remember they came up and they said, hey, we feel like God wants us to build an orphanage in Africa. It's going to be $70-something thousand. And they said, so will you do it? Like, will you kind of harness Breakaway and do it, build this orphanage? And I told them, no. I said, we feel like God's called us to a certain thing, and it's not that. I said, and God laid it on your heart. It's something he laid on there for you, not me. I said, so you do it. And I remember they looked at me like it was a joke. Like I'm looking at these two freshman girls like, you go do it, right? And they're like, thanks, what a loser. You know, like I don't know what they were thinking. But I was like, I bet they didn't take that positively. I don't know. Fast forward to a year later, they come up to me, come bounding up to the stage. And they said, hey, we just want to give you an update. And I said, what? And they go, we did it. Freshman in college, 18, 19 years old, raised $75,000, built an orphanage in Africa. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, it happened. I'm like, how'd you do it? And they're like, well, you know, we prayed and we made bracelets and stuff. I'm like, wait, what? I said, did you just say you made bracelets? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's so crazy. I'm like, just time out. Let me make sure I heard that sentence right. We made bracelets and it became an orphanage in Africa. Let me just sit there for a minute. And it was so cool to see the joy in their faces and go, that is an awesome story in college. That, man, you launched out to initiate something good. And when opposition came, you waded into it because that's what courage does. It resists evil. It launches out to bless, and it overcomes obstacles. And you get to live in the valley of praise, amazed at a God who will come through for you. Last thing, you go, Ben, how do I get it? I want courage, but I'm afraid. Well, it's interesting. Right before you meet Jehoshaphat, 2 Chronicles chapter 16, right before it, God is chastising Jehoshaphat's dad for failing. And the prophet says to him, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless towards him. And I'm usually not a person who likes to knock on English translations of the Bible. I think they're wonderful translations. I think the guys who translated it are smarter than me, but I don't fully understand their choice of the word blameless. It's true, but the word is whole. And so it means blameless because there's not a part of them that's guilty before God, but there's more to the word than that. It means their heart is holy before God. There's no hidden parts I'm holding back. There's no parts where I go, no, God, I don't want you in that part of my life. But it says God's eyes are looking throughout the nations to strongly support Hazak, those whose heart is holy before him. So how do you get courage? How do you get the strength to live a life like that? You don't muster it up. Be courageous. Now, what you do is you draw near to the God who gives courage. A man who is intimate with God is not intimidated by man, Leonard Ravenhill said, and it's true. So last story. I remember years ago when I was right out of college, I was at a camp. And as I was there was a minister there who was doing some things that truthfully I thought were not best in ministry. And at worst, I thought they were immoral. And I felt like I needed to confront him. And they weren't things that like needed to kick him out of ministry, but he needed to have a talking to. But I was young and in ministry, and I was scared. I was scared to confront him. And so I remember I was there at the camp, and I saw him over there, and I was asking God, Lord, will you create an opportunity? Because I don't know how. And there was literally a moment. I'm in the parking lot, and there he is. And I have this moment, and I'm like, yeah. And I just walked off. Just blew the moment. And I remember I just sat down in this cafe. It's not lunchtime. I'm not hungry. I don't need coffee. I'm just sitting there because I'm afraid. Right? And I remember as I was sitting there, I'm like, God, I just can't do it, you know. And no kidding, I'm sitting there and I'm feeling like a failure, like, way to go, dude. And as soon as that happens, I hear in the TV in the corner go, we now return to our program on the 20 most courageous men on the planet. That's the name of the show. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, I feel like a total weenie. And here's a show on the most amazing men ever on existence. And sure enough, the first one's like, he climbed Everest without oxygen or use of his hands, you know, or whatever. And this guy's like, ah, you know. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. And then I'm kind of blowing it off like, whatever, it's all these mountaineers or whatever. But then they get to the number 2 guy, like the number 2 most courageous man in the world. And they're like, the number 2 man is Christian Goodpastor. No kidding, that's his name. And here I am feeling like a terrible Christian and a worst pastor. And they go, the most courageous man in the world, Christian Goodpastor. And I'm like, is this a joke? Like, come on. And they show this guy, and he didn't climb a mountain. He didn't kill an army of people or whatever. They said he was courageous because he had a debilitating disease and he waited patiently until someone was able to do a surgery to give him a new set of lungs and do a life-saving surgery and save his life. And I'm like, wait a minute. Second most courageous guy on the planet. And what made him courageous? He waited on somebody to give him what he desperately needed to live. Amaziah marched out, I forget his name, I don't know how to say it. He marched out because he said, we're the sons of Abraham, and we have the promises of God, the words of God. Jehoshaphat marched out because he said, man, our God cares for us. We're Abraham's kids. Abijah marched out because he said, we're the sons of David. We have the sacrifices of God. And let me tell you something. All that these men had in 2 Chronicles, they were shadows. They were pictures. Because the New Testament tells us that Christ is the true seed of Abraham. The whole reason God put Israel in that place is so that when Jesus was born, the whole world could hear about him. Because he's the true seed of Abraham. And by faith in him, you become a child of God. He's the rightful king. He's the true words of God. He's not a prophet speaking the words of God. He is the word of God to us. And he was the sacrifice for us that forgives sins and gives life. So what do you do to be a person of courage? You come to Christ. You come and dwell in his love. You sit in the love of Jesus. You open up your life to him and let him search you and know you. And I promise you, as you draw near to him, the man and woman who's intimate with God will be intimidated by no man. He'll make you brave.
Well, welcome to the Breakaway Podcast. My name is Jeremy. I'm sitting with Ben Stewart, and we are in the Breakaway office, and it is 2013. We are so thrilled that you guys could join us for this podcast and the new year together. It is already started with a great night last night in Reed Arena for our first breakaway of the new semester.
Yeah, man. I mean, it is just, even several days ago, our first meeting with our team leaders, we do a little retreat with them, and then volunteers working up to Tuesday. It's just felt like the wind is in our sails, man. It has just really felt like we're being carried along by the Lord. And I just love it. I'm already so excited about this semester and felt like last night was a great start. So much energy there in the room. So many cool students I got to visit with afterwards. I mean, we're loving it, man.
It was a blast. And, you know, we always set up and we pray and we expect God to do amazing things every week. But last night, you know, over 5,700 students came to our first breakaway of the semester, and that was the most we've had, I think, in the spring to kick off. They just came in ready and excited, and it really was a special night of worship with Jeff and Jordan Johnson, and then you being able to start this kind of new semester and help us focus in. And the talk just landed square right in the middle of, I think, where students are living right now. And hopefully those of you who have listened to the talk and are listening to this were also really encouraged by the message from last night. And so thanks, Ben, for just helping us kick this thing off.
Sure. You know, I love teaching the Bible. I mean, that is my favorite thing. And I love going through books of the Bible. I enjoy that. But I remember I had a mentor say years ago, he said, sometimes when you're preaching, you just need to speak directly to your people and tell them what you think. And he wasn't saying you don't do that every week. I mean, you do. And when I study a passage of the Bible, you read it, study it until it's lit ablaze in your heart. And so you mean it. I'm not into preaching without sincerity. So I feel like you should always be up there sincere. And I think we are every week. But it's just kind of cool every now and again to do something like this, to go, you know what, this one's going to just go, I've been thinking some things about you for a while, and these have been my prayers for you for a while, so I'm going to say that. And they're scripturally rooted prayers and desires, and so let's take you to those passages. But it's just a slightly different way to get there. And, you know, I didn't have all the words mapped out even on the way up there, but it was it felt easy for me because I'm like, but this is in me. This is something I've been praying for my girls and for these students and for myself for a while. And so I really felt like this is where God had us and felt great about it, man.
That's so great. And for those of you who don't know, during like our announcement time last night, you reminded everybody that you have a daughter, Hannah, and then one on the way.
Yeah.
So when you say girls, that means like Donna, Hannah, and then baby to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
potentially 6 weeks here. Spring break is the due date, somewhere in the spring break mix. Our daughter number 2 will arrive in the world. So yeah, man.
So cool. Yeah, I know a lot of people are excited for you guys, and we're excited and praying. And that does have to affect the way that you prepare and even pray for students, just kind of having this parental love, and then that extending to our students that we get to minister to weekly. And I'm sure that really played a huge part in just kind of the way that you prepared for the talk.
It does. It feels cool because I don't feel... Well, I don't think you should talk down to anybody. And that was something I found in youth ministry. If you speak to junior high students like they're smart and intelligent and mature, they tend to rise to that. So I don't think you talk down to anybody. But with our students, I don't feel like I'm so old that I'm like, look, you kids, y'all figure this out someday. Like I don't feel like an old man. So I still feel like I'm not one of them. I'm not a college student, but I still feel close enough to them that we can talk together, and it's not this big gap or something. But yeah, I also have this new thing that's unlocked in me of seeing them from a little bit different angle. And yeah, I think there's just more of this fatherly piece coming into me that you just think about every day. And I don't think it's an accident God is doing that for me with girls too. Like I grew up, I have a little sister, so it's not like girls are completely foreign, but you can listen to my old talks. There's hardly a talk where there isn't a reference from a war or a book about war or a movie about war. And so it's interesting to...
a little shift in things now.
Yeah. And go, where's some good female heroes? Where's some good female role models? And what do I want my daughter to be like? And those are fun questions
That's
to ask.
Awesome. And I know, too, like with this part of the podcast, we'd love to give you a chance to kind of add some things to the talk that, maybe the day after now you can go, hey, I wish I would have said that or added this, even just some resources we can be thinking about. But was there anything you'd like to share with us now that you'd say, hey, I'm going to add this on to the end of the talk,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say a couple things, man. I mean, one, just to encourage, courage has nothing to do with how big you are, your size, your stature. It really doesn't. It was fascinating. I read the articles when that horrible shooting happened in the movie theater. I watched an interview of a man that was there with his girlfriend and their baby. And he's sobbing in the interview saying, when the shots went off, I left him. I jumped out of the balcony and escaped and left my daughter and like 1-month-old baby in the theater. And he's crying because he felt terribly guilty, and he was sort of trying to rationalize what he did. But there in that moment, he just ran. And then the next day I read this article, and it was a middle school, maybe high school age girl that her friend got hit, and she stayed there and just helped her friend in the middle of all the smoke, all the drama, all the terror. It did not even cross her mind to leave. She's like, my friend is in need, and I stayed there and took care of her. And so you go, man, there was a lion heart in this little girl. And you go, where did that come from? It flowed out of this love for her that was really clear. And I'm not saying this other man didn't love his wife and kid, but I think he has something to wrestle through with that. But all that to say for you is you may not feel like, well, I'm not big, I'm not real intimidating, I'm not even an outgoing person. You go, that what you need is you need to be someone who loves something. And that love will make action in the name of love more important to you even than fear in any moments, So for me, I'm speaking on a stage is actually not that hard for me, but one-on-one conversations of sharing the gospel, I get real fearful. Like my fear level goes skyrocketing, like I told that story of those girls on the plane. That would take a lot for the Lord to fire that up in me. And I want that, and I ask for that. But that's an area where I am weaker, but I can get there where I want to do it when I just start thinking about the Lord, and I do love him, and how much he loves people, and how amazing it is to know him, and how much I appreciate that I know him, and how great it would be for other people to know him. And the more I dwell on that and sit in that, that love becomes bigger than the fear. And that's where we were trying to land it, is don't go, okay, I just need to be more courageous. Go, no, don't. I don't know how to tell you to generate that. I just want you to love the Lord. And the more you love him, the more you'll begin to dislike the things that dishonor him. And you go, and I don't want to participate in those. And the more you'll want to do the things he's doing. And you'll look up and go, I can't believe I'm doing this. Who would have ever thought I'd be living this kind of life? But read the Bible. There's no hero in the Bible that was like, you know what, dude, I'm just going to go be a stinking hero, bro. Look out, world. They were all like, I don't know. And God loves that. So I'd say that. And then the only other piece I would add is this. Some people, a misconception that could happen from a talk like this is you could go, oh, okay, so if I want something, I just got to do it and God will make it happen. Like, Lord, I'm going to go be a millionaire. Bless it. Go. And you sort of just boldly step out to do whatever you want to do. And you're expecting God to come around and bless that. And that's not really how it works. So that's why I wanted to land with 2 Chronicles 16:9, which says, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro to strongly support those whose heart are whole before him. There's some of us that we want to boldly launch out in a direction, but it's not God's direction. And maybe your motive for doing it is not one God can bless. And so he goes, I can't throw my power behind that. I can't support that. And so that's where this isn't just a talk of going, just chase your dreams, because your dreams may be not good. Your dreams may be bad, or they may not be enough. God may have more, But it's interesting when you read through 2 Chronicles, these people who launched out with confidence, read their prayers, they're always highlighting an aspect of a promise God made. And they cling to that. You promised us this, and so I'm acting on your promises, and God shows up. And that's where you want to find your confidence. It's not coming up with, well, I want this, and so God bless it and let it be. You may or may not get that. But when you have a promise from the Word of God, you can bank on that. And your courage can come from that. His word does not return void, but accomplish his purpose. So I'm going to speak his word, knowing that God will use that. He strongly supports those whose heart is his. I go, okay, God, as much as I can, here's my heart. So now I believe as I go out to do the things you've called me to do, preach your word, love people, you're going to support me. And I don't know all the mechanics of what that looks like, but I'm going to go out in the confidence of knowing as much as I can, I know I'm walking with the Lord, and he's going to support me. And I'll tell you, even recently here with Breakaway, we feel that. We don't know sometimes all the twists and turns. And sometimes God brings a crisis and we go, why is this happening? But we go, okay, we're yours. We trust you. We're going to love people even if we're frustrated with them. We're going to speak the truth even when it's hard. And what we found is as we do what he tells us to do, that's what faith is. I believe you and I'm going to bank on it. He has strongly supported us, man. It's unbelievable. And so now you go, I want to step out. If he tells me to do something, I want to do it because he's going to meet me out there on the field of faith, trusting him. So that's what I would say is being courageous is I'm launching out on the promises of God, not necessarily always on whatever you want to do. Now, with that said, if you're seeking the Lord and he's put something on your heart, go for it. Just go for it and see what he does. But always keep your hands open because God may do something that you don't expect, So
that's awesome, man. Well,
thank
you so much. And real briefly before we wrap up, do you want to tell people about what we're kind of getting to do next weekend and some things that we're excited about moving forward?
Yes. One of the things I'm most excited about this spring is what's coming up next weekend. The 25th is our LEAD conference. It's our conference for leaders. Specifically, student leaders is who we're aiming it at. But we called it lead, the verb, because a lot of people can occupy a leadership position, but just having a title doesn't mean that you're doing the verb, the act of leading. And we want to do all we can to help students that God has put in these positions, given these titles, to lead well. And man, we did this last year, and it was one of the highlights of our year. It was so amazing, and we want to do it again. And so if you're listening to this and you're the leader of an organization, be it a Christian organization, non-Christian organization, but you're a leader, you're in leadership, or maybe you're not currently in a leadership role, but you know God's made you a leader, you're welcome to this. You can register online. We're bringing some amazing leaders to come speak to us. And it's a quick deal. It's a Friday night, a Saturday morning, but it's just jammed with content to help students navigate well. There's so many great organizations on this campus that are entirely student run, and we love that. And maybe you're on a different campus somewhere nearby and you're like, man, I'm trying to lead this Christian group. I got this group we're trying to get someplace, and it's hard and I don't know what to do. Man, come to this and interact with us, get to meet other leaders, hear from some great ones, and it's going to be incredible. So I'm just so excited about this weekend and want everybody there because it's going to help us lead better.
Absolutely. Well, you can go onto our website if you'd like to and check out the conference information, and then also register through our website, because we'd love to get you signed up and attending. And then it's actually not just for Aggies. So if other people from other college campuses, other organizations are really excited about getting trained and learning more about how to be an effective leader, you can do that as well. So it's not just solely exclusively Aggie, but definitely are excited that we can offer that here in College Station and do that for the Aggies that are here. So we thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and it is just an honor to be able to do this, and we thank you for listening. And continue to join us, because we've got a full semester ahead of us with just an exciting time of worshiping on Tuesday nights and then getting to be with you via this podcast. So go to our website, breakawayministries.org, if you'd like to know more information on how to connect with us, see our schedule of events for this whole semester, where we're going to be on Tuesday nights. Join us there. And then also, if you'd like to donate, you can do that through our website as well. And keep listening, and we're going to be here. Thanks so much.
See ya.
Bye.